Accident in Farlow Woods. It was nearly 11:30 p.m. by the time I left the party. I had been drinking, but I wasn't drunk. I was buzzed, but I could still drive. I decided to take the long way home, through Farlow Woods. It was a route that I had taken a million times before. The rain came down in sheets. Wipers could barely keep up with its onslaught. I had promised my mom I'd be home before midnight. I should have left earlier. The woods were foreboding, as my car was suddenly engulfed in darkness. The only light came from my headlights, which struggled to penetrate the thick veil of rain. I could barely see the road in front of me, let alone whatever might be lurking in the shadows. I was on edge the whole drive, unable to shake the feeling that I was being watched. The hair on my arm stood on end as thunder rumbled outside. I felt my heart pounding. Lightning struck, illuminating something headed towards me. It was massive, easily twice the size of a bear. I slammed on the brakes, but it was too late. It collided shoulder first with the side of my car. The impact sent my car careening off the road, hitting a tree with such force I felt the tree trunk crack. A jolt of pain shot through my body as the airbag deployed, robbing me of breath. I could hear the creature approaching. I unbuckled my seatbelt to try and get a better look at it. In the flickering headlights, I got my first glimpse of it as it circled the front of the car. I choked out a muted scream. Its glowing red eyes were fixed on me. A wolf-like snout pulled back in a snarl to reveal sharp, blood-stained teeth. Its long claws scraped against the metal as it clambered onto the hood. Before I could react, a huge clawed hand crashed through the windshield. It grabbed me by my hair, hooking deep into my scalp. I couldn't breathe. Its matted fur reeked of death. Panic set in as I struggled to break free from the creature's grip. I wasn't strong enough. The creature hoisted me up and out through the hole in the windshield. The agony of glass tearing into my flesh as I ascended into darkness was the last thing I remembered before waking up screaming in a hospital bed, surrounded by concerned faces. No one believed me when I mentioned the monster. They assumed it was all just a terrible dream. I'm not convinced. I can still see its blood-red eyes pierce my own as it draws me closer. Smell the putrid stench of the creature's breath on my skin. Feel the searing pain as it sinks its sharp teeth into my neck. Doctors say I am lucky to have survived the accident with only a few cuts and bruises. None of it makes sense. All I know is that, for a vegetarian, I suddenly crave red meat. Something's wrong with Martin. I sit here waiting patiently for my prey, the hunter's moon guiding me on my hunt. I've been hunting this bastard for almost a day now, it seems. I hopefully have just enough time to try and compose myself and write what could very well be my final thoughts in this journal, just in case I don't return home. I'm sitting behind this log, watching the shed where the bastard is sleeping in. This wolf, this damn effing wolf, is going to be the death of me. I've told my loved ones what I was going to do. What I had to do is more like it. But everyone I've told just thinks I'm nuts. Nuts, huh? Well, tell that to Mrs. Allen, who was found with her throat torn out on her back porch next to her dog Biscuits, who was also torn apart. Gardening accident. My ass. What about old Mr. Barberry? He was found in his bathroom face down with his hollowed-out anus sticking out in the air. Explosive diarrhea? I don't think so. He was ripped open like a predator rips open their prey, ass first. Why is no one seeing what I'm seeing? These are not accidents. There's been a rash of brutal deaths strewn around town these past few months, but because of lazy police work or pure incompetence, they've all been swept under the rug. I took it upon myself to investigate the matter when I found my dog Bear torn to pieces in the backyard. The size of the wounds and savagery of the attack did not come from some ordinary animal. I found a set of paw prints leading from the body out my backyard and followed them 5 houses over until they stopped at Martin Sylvester's back door. Figures. A real evasive prick who just moved to the neighborhood a few months ago. Also, I know what you're going to say, but there were paw prints leading from the body. It was just a wolf attack. Same shit the police said. Sorry, don't think so. If you had seen these prints, you wouldn't be arguing with me. They were too abnormally large for a wolf. Plus, if it was a regular old wolf attack, like everyone else seems to think, then why did they just disappear at Martin's back door? I'll tell you why. After the incident, I started following Martin. At first, there was nothing peculiar, but then he made a visit to Mrs. Allen's. Then he made a stop to Old Man Barberry's, and we all know what happened to them. The only thing was, I never saw him leave. It was always cluttered, something in the way, just a large mass bolt from the scene at an alarmingly quick speed. I told the police that I saw him leave the scene of both murders, and they had the balls to sit there and tell me that those weren't murder scenes, just merely accidents. Well, after the scenes were wrapped up, I decided to take a look for myself, and not to my surprise, I found a common trait between both murder scenes. And make no mistake, friends, it was murder. I found at both properties a set of large paw prints leading off into the distance. Jesus, those incompetent pricks couldn't even get this right. It took me a little while, but I figured it out. And now here we are, back at the beginning. I've been following him since this morning. Like I said, it's almost been an entire day. I have him cornered in a small shed on the property of a small cabin nestled deep in the woods. I have my rifle sights pointed at Martin. He's beginning to stir now. God, please help me be fast and accurate. Oh, and to the assholes who keep saying it was all just wolf attacks. Well, I guess you're technically right. You see, Martin is a wolf. He's a werewolf. The Hound. Reading the news today, I saw this. Vicious mauling, man butchered. The marks left behind belonged to a hound-like creature, as witnesses said. They said it was bipedal, had an ear-piercing roar, and it did not look like any bear or wolf. Some are even calling it a werewolf. This is the 7th victim so far this week. The police had found a trace of fur left behind by the creature. As I read up to that point, I suddenly realized I need to fix my suit. Meeting under the full moon. As the full moon rose high in the night sky, the werewolf prowled through the woods, his senses sharpened by his lupin form. His golden eyes scanned the trees, seeking his friend who had agreed to meet him here. He longed for the companionship of someone who would understand his condition, who would accept him for who and what he was. For a long time, he wandered through the forest, his powerful legs carrying him over rough terrain with ease. He sniffed the air, catching the scent of other creatures, but none of them were his friend. He wondered if he had been stood up, if his friend had forsaken him for some reason. As the night wore on, the werewolf grew restless. He began to feel a gnawing hunger in his gut, a hunger that could only be satisfied by feeding on the flesh of living beings. But he resisted the urge, knowing that he would never forgive himself if he harmed innocent creatures. Just when he was about to give up and return to his solitary existence, he saw a figure emerging from the trees. It was his friend, also in lupin form, with a shaggy coat and a wagging tail. The two creatures shared a moment of recognition, then bounded towards each other with joy. They spent the rest of the night running through the woods together, playing and communicating in a way that only they could understand. The werewolf felt a sense of belonging and contentment that he had never felt before. He realized that he didn't need to be alone, that he had a friend who would stand by him no matter what. As the sun began to rise, the two creatures parted ways, but not before making plans to meet again. The werewolf returned to his human form, feeling renewed and hopeful for the first time in a long time. He knew that he would never again feel like he had to hide his true nature from the world. With his friend by his side, he felt unstoppable. Don't stop the car. David and Sophie relished every moment of their evening autumn drive in the northeastern Rockies. It was their first real road trip together, finally taking a break from their work as paranormal investigators. Full moon, leaves changing color, winter chill in the air. Had I known any better, I'd think we're looking for a werewolf or a wendigo, Dave said, glancing at Sophie, smiling. His eyes returned to the moonlit road. We never can leave our work fully behind us, can we? Sophia replied, grabbing David's hand and squeezing gently. But don't you think it's a little early for wendigo season? She teased. Maybe, but you never know what you might find. David, look out! Sophie screamed. David slammed on the brakes, eyes fixed on whatever swiftly ran in front of the car. The car sharply swerved, but crashed hard into whatever ran onto the road. The car ran the body over and left it behind, rolling down the road. David stopped the car, staring in the rearview mirror. Oh my God, Sophie, I just ran someone over. Stay here. I'm going to see if they're okay. David, start the car and go. What if we just killed someone? Sophie paused. What if it's a werewolf? Relax, Sophie. We know werewolves don't actually exist. That person was totally bald. And this is wendigo territory, remember? Plus, they're out of season, David said, his attempt at humor failing. Sophie stared at him blankly. David stood out of the car, cautiously walking towards the body. As he approached it, he looked back at Sophie, making sure she didn't leave the car. What the... David looked at where the body was moments ago. Where'd they go? Don't run off! You could be badly hurt, David yelled. Screams came from the car. Sophie! David yelled, sprinting back to the car. The passenger door was ripped open. Blood littered the passenger seat and left a fading trail down the road. David turned toward the trail, seeing where the blood suddenly ended. He began to feel hot breath on his neck. And dogs would save the world. We only learned they existed from security camera footage. Enormous wolf-like creatures moving so fast you barely caught a glimpse of them. They were delicately breaking into houses. They were intelligent. It became clear the werewolves had one purpose: to turn all the humans. Like a hive mind, they all knew the plan and worked together. The military dispatched the first full moon after they were discovered. A lot of good it did. Rifles, tanks, they were nothing to werewolves. The only chance we stood was to find them on the 27 days when they weren't transformed. There is no blood test for being a werewolf. No computer can analyze and find the wolf inside you. Salvation came from man's best friend. Dogs could smell them, even when they were in human form. All over, dogs began freaking out. barking at seemingly innocent passerby on walks. The government recruited all available dogs and owners. I quit my job immediately and went to training with Noki, my German Shepherd. The government paid well. The man in charge of the operation was General Howitz. It was evident he believed this was beneath him, overseeing the training of thousands of dogs. The same officers who trained police dogs trained us. It wasn't long before we were out in public. The government wanted as many dogs in as many places as possible. Noki and I patrolled malls and grocery stores. Noki was good at finding werewolves. In the first week, he found 12. Once identified, the government executed you. There was no trial. It was deemed necessary to eradicate the werewolf menace. A werewolf could easily break out of any jail. They had to kill you before you transformed. Another full moon came. When I woke the next morning, I saw there was a break-in. I examined my body from head to toe. No skin was broken. I hadn't been bitten. Noki must have scared them off. We went back to the government facility to further our training. When I arrived, Noki caught a scent. He followed his nose, me on the leash, all the way to General Howitz. That's when he lost it, barking up a storm. Soon other dogs joined in. "Calm that damn dog down," the general yelled. I looked at the officers around him. They turned the general. The general fought, but the soldiers ended up arresting him. Noki kept sniffing, and soon half the upper brass was arrested. All of them were executed. This went on for another month. Noki stopped finding any werewolves. The humans were winning. The next full moon, I didn't even bother to board up the windows. In the middle of the night, a loud thumping woke me up. It was Noki. He had run up the stairs. He was panting, whimpering between breaths. "You okay, buddy?" His legs grew bigger. His body started morphing. Noki transformed into a werewolf. He gazed at me with intelligent yellow eyes, moving slowly closer, mouth open, slobbering. My girlfriend doesn't like having guests over when it is her time of the month. My girlfriend Hannah, 25-year-old female, and I, a 25-year-old male, have been going out for 2 years now. We moved into a nice house that is on the edge of a town. We are still in the honeymoon phase of our relationship. She has a couple of weird rules that are kind of quirky, but it kind of makes me love her more. One of the rules that I think is the cutest is that we have to go to bed at the same time, so that one of us isn't waking up the other when they come in. Her rule that she is very strict about is that she won't allow any guests over when it is her time of the month. She says that she hates for people to see her like that. I agreed to this rule as I want her to feel safe in her own home. My best friend of 14 years, Tom, 25-year-old male, doesn't approve of our relationship and is always trying to convince me to break up with her. He keeps telling me that I need to be sleeping with random girls while I am still young. I keep telling him to drop it, but then he will mention it again a few weeks later. Hannah hasn't said anything bad about Tom, but I can see that what he says hurts her feelings. I was surprised to discover Tom standing outside our house yesterday evening. He was holding a case of beer and some snacks. He shoved his way past me and told me we were having a guys' night in. I told him that he had to leave, as it was Hannah's time of the month. He just shrugged it off and said it would be fine. I told him he could stay as long as he didn't disturb her, as she was relaxing downstairs. We ended up having a fun evening and watched a couple of movies we used to love as kids. I didn't think anything was amiss when Tom disappeared to use the bathroom. A few minutes later, I jumped out of my seat when I heard his screams of agony. I rushed downstairs to find his blood-soaked body lying on the ground, My girlfriend was sitting there chewing on his arm, while the chains held her in place. I couldn't help but admire how beautiful her snout and fur looked in the moonlight. I gazed down at Tom's body and wished that he had listened to my advice and stayed away during her time of the month. Stuck in traffic. I jerked awake as a deafening sound of the closing door resonated in my ears. It took me a few seconds to understand where I was. I looked up through the window to have a peek of the platform where the train had come to a stop. My head was buzzing, and I struggled to read the name of the station displayed on a blue board. Despite the lights in the station, it was getting dark. A handful of people were sitting in my car. Late workers in gray suits, students with tired looks, and a couple of hobos. My heart started racing as the realization sank in. I was far from home. A chill of terror shook me. How could I have been so stupid? Sure, I had been agitated these last few days, as usual, but falling asleep in the train, tonight, it was a nightmare scenario. I tried to gather my thoughts. My eyes fell on the red handle sticking out above the car door. If I pulled it, I knew the train would come to a stop. Then what? I wasn't sure the doors would open. Sure, I could try to break a window, but I still couldn't make it home in time. I would be in the streets. No way. I quickly counted the passengers of the car. There were 8. I closed my eyes and tried to focus on my breathing, even if I knew it was pointless. I now was bent over with my head between my knees and my hands over my ears. From the corner of my eyes, I could see one of the young passengers giving me a worried look. I had to make a choice. My arched back was soaking with sweat, and I could feel saliva drip between my clenched teeth. The teenager shyly approached me and asked if I was all right. I opened my mouth, but the only sound coming out of it was a distorted and painful scream, as my vocal cords were tearing apart. The young man recoiled, and I could hear the other passengers starting to whisper. The whispers turned to terrified screams when my back started cracking and expanding. My nails were falling, only to be replaced by razor-like claws. As the train emerged from a tunnel, a burning sensation pierced through my chest. The light of the moon, round and high in the sky, was pouring from the window. Tufts of black fur started to grow all over my body. My jaw was starting to shrink, and my nose was getting longer. 8 people, 8 casualties, 8 unfortunates, who would take the toll of my carelessness. I could only hope that 8 would be enough to satisfy its bloodlust. That it wouldn't try to break out of the car and prowl the streets. It shouldn't have happened. Sorry. One thing flashed through my mind before the beast took over. Damn. I should really have passed that driver's test. I don't believe in werewolves. Recently, everyone has been crying about some werewolf terrorizing our village. It's completely bizarre, and I will be honest that I am finding it all amusing. I mean, a werewolf? And there hasn't been anything caught on video footage or CCTV cameras. Okay, some people claim to have caught something on their phone, but the footage is messy and dark and not very clear. It just looks like a wild animal. People have been finding dead bodies that have been mauled to death, which just leads me to think that people need to control their dogs, or just some other wild animal is running loose in the village. So many people keep talking about the werewolf, and they believe it so very much. People have claimed to have seen the werewolf, but I haven't seen a shred of pure, clear evidence. I mean, this werewolf thing has clearly gripped the whole village in such a way that it's making the village a dead one. Apparently, the werewolf is intelligent, and it knows where the CCTV cameras are, and it only comes out at night, in places like forests. This just makes me believe that it is just some sadistic person setting loose his crazy animal on actual people. Anyhow, I don't feel really afraid, and I haven't seen anything, and I have been sleeping well at night. This werewolf has certainly not been living rent-free in my head. I am sympathetic to those who have lost their lives to this crazy animal, or even person, but to think a werewolf is involved is just lunacy. I mean, this is clear-cut mass hysteria, where fear just spreads among the people like a disease. Someone should definitely study the people in my village. It would make an interesting read for professors of psychology, sociology, and psychiatry. Then one day, everyone in my village received a letter. On this letter, it basically asked whether we believed in this werewolf. There was a yes or no answer to tick. I ticked no, obviously, and then I got a knock on the door. It was a large group of men in protective clothing, and they had guns with them. They then quickly made a basic cage for me. They told me that I was the only person in the village who didn't believe in the werewolf. I had to be in the cage, and I surprisingly slept really well. And when I awoke, they showed me video footage of me turning into a werewolf. My clothes magically blended in with the werewolf, and when I turned back to normal, my clothes were normal. The reason I haven't seen or heard the werewolf is because I am the werewolf. The werewolf has a good mind of its own, and it knew it was in a cage, and so it didn't bother fighting. The werewolf did a good job in making sure that I never realized that I was the werewolf. The Werewolf's Gambit. When I was 14, I was squire to a knight who asked me to join him in the impossible. Help me kill the wolfmen. I hesitated but said, I will. My whole life there had been a conflict between my kingdom and the werewolves, the beasts who ruled our forest. They never attacked us, but they surrounded our kingdom. Our king was an asshole. He didn't want half-beings, unholy creatures surrounding his lands. It made him look weak, maybe even pathetic. So, the holy king made a decree. He called the knights of the kingdom together and declared, any man who slays the Wolf King will be allowed an unprecedented gift. I will permit you my daughter's hand in marriage. Every warrior knew the implication. To be given the princess's hand meant a direct line to the royal throne. Everyone for miles accepted, including my knight-errant. A large group of us arrived in the forest, hoping for glory, but all we found was silence. Where do we find these bastards? A knight chuckled. A large rock fell from the tree above him, crushing his helmet and skull. My master pulled me close and screamed, to arms! The wolves knew we were coming. They sliced us to pieces. It was me and my lord left when the Wolf King showed himself. He stopped all the wolves from attacking and beckoned my master to fight him one-on-one. My master whispered to me, run, then charged. He didn't get a single strike before the Wolf King swung his claws and sliced his head off. The Wolf King walked up to me, licking the blood off his claws. Do you wish to live? He scratched me across the face with his slobbery claws. Yes, I begged, for all men wish to live. I ask only one thing. The Wolf King kneeled. Chop my head off and bring it to your king. End this war between me and your people. I obliged, and all the wolves left, leaving me to return to my king with the king wolf's head. You've done it! The king sang out in joy. I threw the head of the Wolf King on the steps before my king, and I said, I'd like my prize. Yes, the king said, you will marry my daughter. I felt something strange. Fur began to erupt from my skin, and I grew and hungered and hated. I was becoming a wolf man. Kill him! The king screamed, but it was too late. My hunger overcame me, and I jumped up and ripped off the king's head with my teeth. Our kingdom had been outsmarted. The Wolf King let me kill him and bring his head before my ruler because he knew I would transform into a wolf and kill our asshole king. With the second king's head in my hand for the night, I laughed, knowing that maybe I had fulfilled the Wolf King's wish of bringing peace. The Werewolf That Lived on Mulberry Hills. The campfire devoured the logs of wood in the night sky as a group of 6 boys settled themselves around it. Okay, guys, this is it, a boy said, known as Lloyd. The one thing campfires are infamous for. Oh, good. I was waiting for this time. I'll have an entire pack to myself, a boy called Jack said stupidly. Idiot. There's a difference between famous and infamous, snapped a boy named Peter. He means to say we're off to sleep now. Shut up, both of you morons, came Lloyd's reply. I mean neither of them. He ignored the scandalized look Peter gave him and continued. So, yeah, I'll be the one starting first. And the one I'm going to be saying is quite different from the others you hear, because this one is as real as you all sitting here. Lloyd gave him a look of deep loathing and continued. As I was saying, what I'll be telling you is perfectly real, even if it sounds as if it's not. When everyone continued to stare at him, he decided to continue with his story. There was a man who lived in a house on a hill called Mulberry Hills. He was a werewolf, and he lured children into his house and ate them. Once, he bit a boy he caught because he was causing a lot of trouble and locked him in the basement to eat for dinner. Of course, he too was a werewolf after he was bitten, and he killed the man. Legend has it that he stalks around and kills people every full moon. Peter yawned. While doing so, he missed the look Lloyd gave him. Where's Fenner? Came Arthur's voice after a few minutes of silence. Oh, he might have gone to excuse himself the trouble of listening to Lloyd's childish story, came Jack's reply. Isn't your little werewolf going to come today? Huh, Lloyd? He chided. Oh, I don't know. He might, Lloyd said slowly. Isn't Fenner's name something related to werewolves? Arthur wondered. Oh, wait. Jack looked horrified. Yeah. Fenner was the name of a murderous wolf in Norse mythology. Fenner isn't here, and admit it. When have you ever seen him on a full moon? Jack and the others looked horrified, except Lloyd, who just said, Told you so. Fenner returned after a few minutes to everyone's shocked and horrified looks. Confused, Fenner made his way towards Lloyd and sat beside him. Oh, they believe you're a werewolf, said Lloyd, correctly interpreting his silence. Aren't you scared? He asked menacingly, flashing a toothy grin that looked horrifying. Oh, no, not at all, said Lloyd. But aren't you? Fenner was taken aback, figuring out what he meant, and he understood. So did everyone else. The clouds parted, revealing the full moon, and Lloyd, flashing an ethereal grin, looked up and howled, exploding into a ball of brown fur. I would like to give a heartfelt thank you to the special friends of the channel for your overwhelming generosity. If you would like to support the channel, the link is below, in the description. Also, please send me your stories and poems to duchessofdarkness27@gmail.com. You can also find me on Instagram at duchess.ofdarkness and Twitter at duchessofdarkn2. I want to thank all my listeners for your kindness, your encouragement, and your support. It means the world to me. Thank you for joining me. Until next time.